Hi, welcome to National Arts. I'm your host, Mike Baker. We're here in Shepherdstown, the oldest town in the state of West Virginia and home to the Contemporary American Theater Festival. Each summer, the festival produces 6 new plays and rotating repertory. Playgoers call it the ultimate theater experience. On this program, we'll meet the actors and director of A Welcome Guest, a Psychotic Fairy Tale, a play that explores insanity, intolerance, and the notion that underneath, we're all one big happy family. Or are we? Middle East overtones and a real or imagined World War III scenario abound in this play. We're transported through a surreal adventure by Michael Rogers, who plays Lucius, Wade McCullum, who portrays Shimmius, the unwelcome guest, Lou Sumrall and Kate Udall, who play McMoley and Shananana, respectively.
My visit is more in the nature of a Christian mission, like that visit to Mary and Joseph in the manger behind Hotel Bethlehem.
Season 5. I love that episode.
May today's visit end as happily with the arrival of a Savior.
Behind every great play, I feel there's some sort of a classical influence. And you and I talked just real briefly when I thought that Lucius just was too close to Lucifer, not to at least allude to. And then you mentioned John Milton's Paradise Lost, and I thought, always been one of my great epic poems that I enjoy reading. And there is, the story is not only symbolic, but somewhat similar.
Well, what does Lucifer do during the war? With God. He says, I'm going to go deep down to the earth and find something that's going to explode this place. And he blows it up, he attacks him. But then what does God do? God's got a lieutenant named Michael.
The archangel.
He says, Michael, go get them, please. And he goes down with his sword. So even if Milton's got the bomb, not Milton having the bomb, even if Lucifer's got a bomb, there's something bigger than that bomb.
Or Beelzebub.
Right? And it goes. My joy with Milton is when he finally goes down to earth, when he finally, Lucifer is at the gates of hell, trying to go down to earth, and he's stopped by someone who's got a dart and says, you don't go through this gate. And he says to him, do you know who I am? You telling me I can't go through this gate? Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
And just as he's about to fight with this person, the woman comes out and says, stop, son, leave your father alone. And we find out that is Lucifer's son by sin.
Yes.
Well, we won't get into all of that.
A lot of similarities.
Yes.
And then you mentioned the explosion, and what is unclear and left the imagination is this what is left after World War III? Are the remnants of this civilization that are still at war with one another?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
right now as we speak.
Yeah, and then not only that, but it's a continuum, and these dumps, these ammo dumps they talk about, are just another way of gathering weapons to continue this conflict in perpetuity.
Well, our world has got people in countries with nuclear weapons.
Yes.
And arguments about that.
Yeah.
You know, why should you have a nuclear weapon? Why don't I have a nuclear weapon? And the wife says a brilliant line. How can we live next door to some crazy guy with his finger on the trigger? We're experiencing that right now as we speak.
Yes.
My family will not sleep with a stranger under our roof.
There's 2 ways to view my request. One, as an opportunity to show Christian charity. Or 2, as a formal directive from Metro Case Officer Lucius Van Go.
That's what I love about new material. You know, and you have to come to new material with new eyes.
Yes.
And people leave, which is okay, but a lot of them are not able to bring their new eyes because it's hard to see new. We're used to what we know, and we want to live in that little box all the time. And when we're told something, nah, it's like she says that story about his hand. Not true. And he says, no.
Metro it's interesting how you interject yourself in this situation, and you're really a controlling figure, and yet you somewhat extract yourself from the conflict.
Yes, absolutely.
After legitimately someone signs on the dotted line, and then you extract yourself. Boy, does that have bearing on today and how withdrawn we are sometimes from that conflict.
He's in the middle of the conflict.
Yes.
And he has to tap into Metro.
Yes.
And he says, resolve this among yourselves. It's a pain in the ass for me.
Yeah, I'm
and
pretty
he
much,
leaves.
sign this paper, I'm pretty much done with you.
Yes, he leaves, and that's it. You know, it's interesting. He appears briefly, and I believe less is more. Every time he shows up, it's brief, but it's a solid. Things change.
Yes.
Things change, and he is controlled too. He is not the end of it all.
No.
Right.
And that's fascinating to try to imagine who's controlling him.
Oh Lord. Oh Lord.
I don't even know who controls him.
And what is his conscience like?
Yeah.
Because he knows what's below here from the very beginning of the play.
Yes.
And he plays this game with them, brings them popcorn, talks all
Yes.
this nice stuff, but he knows from the very beginning. That is very dangerous also.
Yes.
That's what happens to us when we're put in situations that we're forced to do things that we don't have a lot of control over. And we realize, oh shit. But never mind, enjoy, he can stay here, this one can stay here, and he come. It's mind-boggling for me.
Yeah.
And it's what excites me about the play.
It's the seed of civilization.
Also, something that we haven't talked about is language. If you follow the language, you can never go wrong. And he has created in this play a unique language scape
Yes.
that if you follow it clearly, it takes you into places that you had not imagined.
No.
You know, and that coupled with what happens all around us is, I think, a piece of brilliance. And some people miss it, you know, but let's hope some people get some of it. If one person gets it, we've done our job.
It only takes one person to change the world. It also takes one person to pull the trigger.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's the pleasure for me in this play. I read this play in Lent. We had a reading in New York. And I said, this is a fascinating play, because I do a lot of new plays, but this one. And I said, but I figured it wasn't going to get done no time soon. Because what it was saying, I said, yeah, who's going to let this play come out and let the place be affected by it?
Oh, yeah.
But when they called and offered it to me, I said, oh my God, now we got to do it. But I'd love to do it.
Paradise Found.
Say no more.
Quirky, but harmless. Just ignore it.
A stranger screaming at the ceiling, crawling around on his hands and knees all night. How am I supposed to ignore it?
Like we learn to ignore so many things, Mr. Brown. For example, when we first granted your family permission to occupy Toppleton, local residents flooded us with complaints. They still do on occasion.
It's a challenge for you, isn't it?
It's a fun challenge.
Yeah.
It's a really meaty role, and being a new play and being a fairy tale, a demented fairy tale at that, the rules are very different. And so when examining who this being, this Shimius character is, I've started to experience it like a hive, like you just said. There's sort of, he's the whole hive. And as the leader of this Shimius group, I believe he has access to all the 280,000 of them on the planet. So he can access their language base, their past, and act from their tactical systems as much as his own when he's working in his optimum.
Yes.
At the beginning of the play, when we meet him, his whole family has been burnt. And basically his hard drive has crashed from the deep emotional experience. So for the first part of the play, it takes him a while to even begin to talk. But by the end of the play, things have changed quite greatly.
Now, your chronicle that you parade about, I couldn't help but think, once you take over the West Bank, all of a sudden you find the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I couldn't help but think about that. I mean, is there any legitimacy to that?
Of course there's legitimacy to that.
All right.
I'm in a fairy tale,
Okay.
a futuristic fairy tale.
There you
I
go.
come from, I'm sort of an alien character.
Yes, you are.
There are many analogies that could be drawn to our modern situation. But my job as an actor is really to tell this fairy tale story. And the document that I find that's buried in the floorboards of this huge Toppleton industrial building are the documents that say that Shimius owns Toppleton. So the person who came in as a refugee has now found the document that says
Yes.
he owns the building he's a refugee in.
Yeah, one of the neutralizing forces is the fact that there's relationships here, unexpected consequences that come from that. And in essence, if you look at that part of the world, the DNA has to be similar. It has to be. And so what do we fight over? Power? Control? Is that what this is all about?
There's a line in the play, Shimius says, "Can two hearts beat in one body? Can two minds think one thought? Much can be shared, but power never." And it's one of the more tragic lines in the play, I think, because the characters are standing on the precipice of an agreement an option of finding middle ground, and yet there's a calcification of ideas of ownership, and it causes a real tragedy. And so, yeah, personally, it does seem like there could be things learned from our play in terms of flexibility and finding commonality, and that we all come from one species. We are essentially the same. We are all brothers and sisters, and it's true. And how can we point at our commonality and celebrate our differences and live in peace?
There's a theme in this play of encroachment, and how we're continually negotiating borders and territories and fences and walls, and it seems to be human nature in a way to try to carve out our own territory and be somewhat protectionist.
I mean, it's what's allowed us to flourish as perhaps the primary species on the planet, is our adaptability and the ability to draw a boundary and flourish within that boundary. And that, you know, the permeable membrane of boundaries is really, this play is sort of tit for tat. You know, we move it a little this way, move it a little this way, and how boundaries can really cause conflict, but also can cause flourishing depending on how they're used. And I think it's a really, it's a topical conversation for sure. Yeah.
Bob, look, what's he doing? This is not right. We've been good occupants. We scare people away. Without us, scavengers could break in, strip this place bare.
Like you do.
A little scrap, some pipes and wires, sweat equity.
2 entire floors worth, going on 3.
You're like everyone else deep down. You act appreciative. You pretend to respect the Browns when we are face to face. But underneath, you don't value us.
I could sit down and read this 3 times and find another biblical allusion. So in a way, it smacks of the Bible, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Birth, death, rebirth. I mean, it really does. It seems to be revelations from chapter, line, and verse. Yeah.
And Michael Weller, so brilliantly, I think, is sort of equal opportunity poking fun at sort of all sacred texts. And somehow every text that has been revered thusly, there's holes in the text, and there's logical disparities, and there's arguments around. And there's another brilliant line where he says, oh, that chapter? No, that chapter is to be read as a metaphor. When it comes down to sharing ownership, that's not meant to be taken
I love
literally.
that line. That line, everybody laughs. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of humor in this play.
It's a very funny piece.
Yes, it is. I think there's a lot of quiet laughter. When I was shooting some of the show in the back, I was enjoying the audience. They were all whispering, figuring things out among themselves, and at the same time chuckling and laughing at just about everything.
It's like a riddle in some
Yes,
ways, right?
it is a riddle.
And some people get on the riddle train and they start to kind of decipher the riddles. There's layers and layers, and some others are just watching it, taking it at face value. But the humor definitely disarms.
Another symbol is scrap metal. And that's where I thought, what would we prize should there be some kind of mass conflict in the world and we were rendered to just a few thousand people left? Somehow the seat of civilization in the Middle East would still be where there would be people remaining, even though the big bomb might take place there would be people left. And what would they prize? The only thing that I could think of was scrap metal. That the pieces left from the structures would be that which they can somehow metaphorically rebuild and or use as some kind of coin. I mean, we're sitting on a set where the character is guarding this as if it's treasure. That's the only thing I could think of. Can you shed some light on that for me?
I love that. In the process of metamorphosis, one of my best friends is a lepidopterist. There's these imaginal cells that wake up when the caterpillar's insides dissolve, their organs dissolve, and they become a chrysalis. And these imaginal cells drink the nutritive soup of the caterpillar's organs, and they start to build the butterfly. And it feels like a corollary to what you're saying is that the people who survive and are able to adapt and continue past a major demarcation of tragedy or destruction are the ones, the imaginal cells, who can create from the garbage of the previous civilization a new world and maybe that world will be filled with peace. Maybe it will be the butterfly civilization. I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Song is very important here. I sort of kind of hearken it back to somebody who has little to say, but just muses out loud and sings. Somehow that just diffuses the situation. Is that what it's used for?
Yeah. It does feel like song is used as a diffusing mechanism. Yeah, it does.
It's like singing out loud, singing out loud, emptying your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody takes it literally, but it's somewhat amusing.
Yeah.
And then we won't give away the ending because I think the ending is one of the priceless moments I've ever seen in theater. But right at the cusp of overall destruction, this beautiful moment happens, and it leaves it totally up to the audience as to what transpires after that. And you love that moment. I was watching all of you. You all relish that moment because it does diffuse the situation.
Yes, it has a very sort of Brechtian ending, and it does leave a lot up to interpretation. It's my favorite kind of theater.
Yes.
That asks a question rather than gives any answers.
Does he talk?
He suffered a profound blow. He needs time to self-regulate.
Oh, it's okay, Mr. Shimmy. Oh, you're safe with us. Oh. In my arms, gonna find comfort. In my arms, gonna find more. I don't mind. Whatever you find, I don't mind. Whatever you find, I don't mind. It's yours. Come on, all together.
I'm in the presence of McMoley and Shananana, a new world order. And yet you are the established ones. You're the ones that are being encroached upon.
Yes.
I think, obviously, you go in search of the weapons dump as a means of self-protection.
Right.
But at the same time, you're the ones that embrace encroachment. You're the ones that are more caring. You, for example, welcome the guest with a hug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never imagining what it was going to turn into. Is that legitimate?
Yes, I mean, I think for me that I'm definitely a spirit of compassion, a spirit of yes, a very sort of traditional definition of what femininity and femaleness is that welcoming, caretaking, embracing, soothing, nurturing. I'm sort of have that represent that principle of life clearly.
McMoley, on the other hand, I mean, there is a certain machismo there. There's a certain toughness. But let's not insinuate that there's not a lack of understanding of what's going on here. In a lot of ways, you're more giving than taking.
Yeah.
You really are.
Well, he eventually lets himself be convinced either through his higher power or the people who love him or the powers that be. This is probably the best way to go. I'm not going to win this, but so what can I do to gain something from it?
I noticed lately you've been talking to God to get some answers.
Yeah.
Well,
It's quite
God's
interesting.
promised you resolution, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Some form of resolution. So God speaks to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, finding this guy, because he's so very not like me,
Yes.
I think we have a similar kind of energy, but our thought and our justifications are wildly different. But I think for me, finding this guy, the idea of talking to your higher power constantly was something that helped me ground who he is inside me and allows me to go to places where Lou wouldn't go, but McMoley has to.
You share a birthmark.
Yes. That's so intriguing to me.
You've been branded.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been branded as brothers.
Yeah.
But do you band together as brothers?
Well, we get that one moment.
You do, don't you?
We get that one moment, and then I think ego and fear and territoriality come right back in the moment there's any kind of challenge to either one of us, Shimius or myself, continuing on in a peaceful way of, because his line that was mentioned before of we can't share power. And then we have this way, this miracle way. We're family. We can share power because we according to the Shimeous way, we are all one and we can all tap into that, especially the firstborn males have this facility. But with the differentiation, and basically we say your bloodline's going to die, what have you got to lose in throwing down and making it the way you choose it to be, rather than accepting this new unknown of, I will no longer be a part of the lineage of this. And what are we willing to throw away in the name of that?
Shananana,
Yes.
you are, as God would say, you're the peacemaker.
Yes,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I'm
in a
also
way.
the first one, I'm also a fundamentalist, and I am the first
Yes.
one to start the countdown.
Yes.
I am the first one who says, okay, well, it is, the principle matters more than the fact.
And you actually are, at your hands, the poison pill is actually laid out.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a really interesting thing, is that she is this nurturing, I am this nurturing,
Yes.
welcoming, yes, 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 we can absorb this, we can go with this. But I also am a fundamentalist, and I am the one who says, we'll blow it up.
When you, as territory begins to shrink and you're encircled, that promulgates this fundamentalist theory, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, those cones are so existential.
Yeah.
Is a good word.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
they start
Yeah.
as small cones,
Yeah.
and then they become larger cones. And at one point, I think you really are imprisoned, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're,
To some
you're
degree.
almost
Right,
surrounded.
yeah, with our razor wire.
You're almost
yeah.
surrounded.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first saw the set, I looked at your bedroom quarters, and the first thing I thought of, I heard the Christmas music, the adaptation of the Christmas
Yeah.
music playing in the background, and I looked at that. It almost looked like a manger of sorts.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
that.
where you all were inhabiting.
That's so
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, and the initial seat of civilization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's decorated in a very festive way.
Right.
Yeah, as if maybe the wise men have already been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the design team did a
And there is the
beautiful
talk
job
of,
on this.
may this arrival be the new birth of a savior.
Yeah.
You know. And
Yes. How interesting that you have a hard time manipulating the Christmas tree, but Shimeous doesn't.
Oh yeah, the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's interesting magic. There's
Yes.
I think the political parable kind of holds, but I also think that as Michael was writing it, other elements came in that sort of take it to another place, because there's this whole introduction of magic, and Shimeous is creating land masses and worlds and overnight hybrids of melon. And so there seems to be also an interesting world of magic that isn't quite so easily defined as sort of, this is a play about politics.
Maybe if we do him a good turn, he'll return the favor one day, like in that show. Andromacles saves a lion.
To comfort the afflicted. Isn't it a Christian act?
One night, he stays down there by the cable schools under the floodlight where we can keep an eye on him.
Shimeous, you want to stay there?
Oh, he spoke. Our Christian love is stirring his vocal folds.
He wants to stay with our son.
do
We can
sleepover.
have a club. There's room enough.
You don't want your own bed, you want to be alone.
My kid stays in his tent. You're down at the far end or you take a hike.
This play can be likened to a dance of death,
Oh, certainly.
without giving away the ending.
Yeah.
A dance of death. How will it all play out? Sooner or later?
I wish I could say something very smart about Strindberg right now, but I can't.
It's all right.
August Strindberg, yeah.
Dance of death.
I dropped
Yeah.
Strindberg, but that's as far as I can go with it.
Yeah, it's a dance of death.
Yeah.
It's a
I think
beautiful
we're
piece.
always there, though, as a society, as a society. We're always there with our power structures, our conflicts. It's always the caterpillar crawling along the razor. You know, it's like, how do we all stay alive, and how do we not blow everything up?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the entire premise behind the Cold War. You know, this play talks to so many issues. It's not just this one thing. Yes, we can draw the parallels because of how things were referred to, the Bible, Palestinian, the Jewish land. It's but it's always there. It's always that, how do we not erase ourselves now in the name of our own ego? from
And
my
also,
take on
yeah,
it.
it's interesting because it's ego, but it's also just a struggle for resources. I mean,
Oh,
just
yeah.
practical,
Yeah. Oh,
scrap
yeah.
metal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
fruit.
Yeah,
There's a constant struggle for
I
resources.
think we use that, though, as a society, as a people, as an animal. We're always claiming it's about resources. It's about this. We all had to go to
Your son
Afghanistan. We've
says
all
that.
lined up to go to Afghanistan because we all need the titanium.
But I'm here on Metro business.
Another complaint from the Swedish meatballs.
Thank you for joining us on National Arts. I hope you enjoyed meeting director Ed Herendeen and the cast of the thought-provoking A Welcome Guest, A Psychotic Fairy Tale. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so you be a part of it.